Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Lanzillotti, and today we are going to cover what I titled the ultimate HBS interview prep. So I hope this presentation definitely lives up to that billing and everyone's standards here. But specifically, um, we're going to cover kind of the rationale behind the questions HBS asks, their admissions committee asks during the HBS interview. Later I want to probably dispel any myths or rumors you may have about why they do the things that they do in the interview. Um, but we all know that it is going to be a rather in-depth and intense interview. And I just want to explain some of the logic so that you know going into it that this is not anything that's meant to beat you up or intimidate you or anything like that. It's just meant to vet who they're getting, right? And you want them to do that. So and then later, towards the latter half of the presentation, I'm going to cover some actual past one-on-one interviews and go over the techniques that I see the HBS admissions committee use or utilize over the last few years. Any of the questions that are in this presentation are from actual interviews my clients have had. They're not from any guide or anywhere else. Maybe they are consistent with some guide that you can buy online, but they are of the actual questions. The follow-up questions are exactly what my clients have seen, and a lot of times exactly what I prepped them for, of course. And then at the end, like I said a few seconds ago, but I love repeating myself, your questions, my answers towards the end. All right, let's move on. All right, so real quick, maybe I should have done this earlier. How do I know what I'm talking about? Again, my name is Paul Lanzillotti, but how do I know what I'm talking about? I've been doing admissions consulting since what, 2017, according to the slide, right? Personally worked one-on-one with over 600 candidates to BSchools and other fun professional programs. And I've done a lot. I've had a lot of people apply to Harvard, a lot of people get in over the years. And fun fact, I think it was 2 years ago, round one, 2 years ago, it was 2 years ago, 20% of all applicants from India admitted in round one to HBS were my clients, huh? Self high five. Anyway, if you want to learn any more than that about me, there's the link. Send me a meet and greet on LinkedIn and we'll join forces. All right. What's the purpose of this interview? As if it wasn't already obvious, but let's drill down and think about this a little more analytically. What is the purpose of your HBS interview? All right, of course, they're trying to evaluate your fit with the case learning environment at HBS, right? We know the case learning method and the learning environment it produces is going to be very intense, rigorous. We've all heard the rumors, right? Um, but what I call it is no place for wallflowers, no place for wimps, right? You have to be able to go into that environment, in a cohort or in a classroom of 90 students and a professor, and you have to be able to take a stand. You have to be able to articulate how you feel about a case study. You can't just sit back. Every day you have to be prepared. And that learning environment, the case method learning environment, cannot function unless everybody is equally engaged and sufficiently aggressive, I'll call it, right? So if you're the type of person who kicks back, maybe if you're even an introvert, and I know introverts are welcomed at HBS. You can go read blog posts about that from Harvard students, but really, you have to bring your A game every day. I don't know if HBS still has this, but they used to have a head doctor, a psychologist, psychiatrist on staff, by the way, when people would melt down and freak out because it was so intense. Anyway, the second yellow line. What's the other purpose of the interview? To stress test you in a necessary and appropriate way. If you can't stand the heat in an interview that goes on for 30 minutes, pretty much exactly, it's not a good leading indicator for who they're getting, right? So they will apply sufficient pressure on you. They're not trying to F with you. I mean, at least not that much, but everything they do has a point. A lot of times, my clients, um, before we start the prep, they'll ask me, if they're digging so deep into X or Y experience on my resume or my essay or my application, do they actually think that I'm lying about that? I mean, it makes me think they don't believe me. Absolutely not. Listen, you would have never ever gotten the interview if they thought you were a liar, if they thought something was fabricated or not true, right? That's just not the way the world logically works. So All they're trying to do is vet the experience. They may actually be personally interested in that experience, but more than anything else, they want to know how you think, right? So, yes, how you communicate and present your ideas clearly, but they want to know how you make decisions and how you think in the moment during the interview, but also from your seminal experiences in life. All right. So, again, I always say wimps and wallflowers need not apply to HBS. They're trying to weed you out. So if you look good on paper because you hired a super duper admissions consultant, or maybe you're an excellent writer, you will be revealed um, probably during that interview, right? So you know, just be aware. So again, and I mentioned this a couple seconds ago, so I am going out of order here, but they are trying to test how you think on your feet. How you respond to their answers, how you converse, how you make it a conversation, and they really want to know. They really want to know if you can roll with the punches, right? This is meant to be a conversation. Um, and I go over this a little later, but if there's something that needs clarification, if there's a statement that the interviewer makes that's simply not true, about the state of your industry, about some characterization of your experience, they expect you. It's a little bit of a tactic that they may do, but they expect you to push back as a mature adult, mature, confident, potential HBS student would do, just like you would do in the case method. So again, if you look at the big picture here, everything is being kind of oriented towards who are they getting in that seat at HBS, and will that person do well in within the rigors and intensity of the case method, right? So no wet noodles. All right, now what else? Okay, self-awareness. I mean, we have a Venn diagram here. I think it's converging rapidly, but um, interviewers will often ask questions about your letters of recommendation, and why is that demonstrate awareness? Well, they want to know if you understand what you did well. So remember the letter of recommendation. Of course, you've never seen it before, but your boss will have written something about something you do well compared to your peers. And then the second question will be constructive criticism or a weakness your boss has levied. And what was your response? How did you improve? Right. So they are trying to gauge your self awareness. If you want to have a good understanding of your strengths and weaknesses, and you should, right? Because your boss should have told you what those weaknesses are, right? And arguably have praised you for your strengths. Anyway, my belief is that they do check the math, right? If you bring up examples about projects or weaknesses or strengths, and they're nowhere near what anybody may have mentioned on your letter of recommendation, um, if they are inconsistent, it doesn't look that great, right? But if somebody criticized you because you always have food in your teeth, or you don't form complete sentences, something like that, and you have no idea, but your boss wrote extensively, perhaps both of your recommenders wrote extensively, and you don't bring it up, someone looks a little clueless. Anyway, let's move on. All right. What is the purpose of your interview? Slide 2 of 2. So they're also trying to understand, especially when they ask you questions about leadership experiences you may have had, how you work with others to overcome obstacles, and in general, at a higher level, how you view challenges. Do you go after them? Do you view them as opportunities to improve or prove yourself, to do better, right? Um, and they're really trying to piece together this big puzzle across all aspects of your application. But really, in the interview, when you say you've learned this, or when you said you accepted or went after this opportunity, undergraduate or work or outside of the office, does it appear, or do you communicate or give them the sense that you're going after these things knowing they're hard, knowing that it's the path less traveled, and you deliberately rush into that battle, that cauldron, that test, and willingly accept um, a good amount of risk, responsibility, and even the potential that you may actually fail, right? Um, and we can get into that if people have questions about specific failures that you may be asked about in the interview. Um, so they just want to know how you've grown from them, and if you fundamentally, if you are a person who goes after challenges because you view them as opportunities to improve and grow stronger and evolve and transform and things like that. They also will start digging, or what else is the purpose of the interview here? To ascertain the true nature of your personal motivations and resultant decision making across all aspects of your life. So, what does that mean in plain English? To know whether or not you're full of shit, basically, right? And to see if you're not, there's no Jekyll Hyde mentality or attitudes or perspectives here. So if you are someone who is a leader and hard worker in life, um, and you're pursuing a certain objective because you want to save every whale in the ocean or bring running water to every well in the desert, if you're demonstrating something that's inconsistent with who you say you are and who they thought they may have believed that you are or were on the application or through your essays, if it, if they start vetting you here and drilling down, and the story starts to fold like an origami swan, right? Then they're gonna, they're gonna call bullshit. And quick story time here, grandpa story time here. A little bit of a deviation from the slide here. They will, you know, S interviews, if you're not prepared, will go sideways. I've seen it happen, right? And I've heard it happen. And and if they start asking you questions, and I don't want to scare anybody here, but if the interviewer, Chad, starts asking you questions that you've never seen before, you didn't see in any guide anywhere on the internet, nobody you've ever known who's gone to Harvard has ever been asked these questions, that's not a good thing, right? And I can get into more later, but if you flub some of the easy, you know, um, easy field goals here in the early half, um, I believe that the interviewer will ask you extremely hard questions that are not from any script that you've seen, because not that they want to destroy you, but they're giving you an opportunity to basically save the game with a few seconds or a few minutes left in the half. So if somehow you flub the first few easy questions, but you really save the prince or the princess with the closing seconds of the game with a Hail Mary, then you may actually redeem yourself, but probably not. All right. So, okay. So let's see. Um, I have some examples here. I don't want to read every single bullet point here, but you know, they don't bullshit these people. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. The interviewer, Chad, and Sarah, and whoever else you may be interviewing with, right? Um, they know more than you think that they know, right? They have extensively gone over your application before you even walk into the room. Everything is rather scripted, even though it may not seem like that. They know exactly what they're doing. They've been doing it for a long time. Harvard's been in the game for a while, and they you're always being observed, by the way. But if you and I think I covered this a little bit on the other slide, so now I'm ruining the rest of the presentation for myself. But don't bullshit, right? If you aren't sure how to answer a question, the number one thing you need to be is confident when you do that, right? There will always be a question or part of a question or some moment in any interview, even if you've prepped for years for it, that where it goes sideways, right? It doesn't have to be a total shitstorm, but where it just goes sideways and maybe you flub an answer, you forget to say something, or you see that they have a weird reaction, or they keep questioning you about it and you're nervous. At the end of the day, if they ask you for an opinion about something, and there will be questions where they ask you for your personal or professional opinion or assessment about something, you need to answer honestly. Don't tell these people at HBS what they want to hear, because they will sense that, I swear to you, and they will start drilling into that, and you will crumple, right? Um, and if it's bullshit, but if it's something that you personally feel, right? Um, one time, this is a few years back, I had a client who was asked about, you know, tell me why. It's almost like sell me this pen, right? That type of question, but convince me of something you really believe in. Now they haven't asked that question in years, but my client talked or spoke about why the death penalty should be outlawed, right? And okay, maybe for some listening right now, that may make total sense, right? But for others, maybe it doesn't, right? But he put, he asked the question, how sure do you have to be that someone is absolutely guilty? Like, what does without a doubt mean, right? For you to convict that person. Anyway, so he wasn't sure if he should give that answer, right? When I talked to him about this afterwards, but he did, and he's, already graduated from HBS. He's an old man. I'm an even older man, but he, that's what you need to do. And I know a lot of you on this call or on this presentation will be thinking, "Well, I don't want to say anything controversial. I don't want to say anything rude. I don't want to be offensive." If you're thinking that way, you're playing defense. You're pulling your punches. that is a very weak foundation on which to start preparing, right? Do not, this is an opportunity. So HBS, the interview makes a difference. A lot of other interviews for a lot of other schools, top business schools out there, where you don't interview with members of the admissions committee, don't move the needle that much, right? It's almost like you're in already. Maybe if you screw it up, they'll waitlist you, but you're probably in if you get the interview. Maybe, right? Um, just play it safe, land the airplane. Don't buzz, don't buzz ATC. So here though, this is an opportunity. If let's say you're competing with a few other people from your whatever IIT you went to or whatever school you went to, um, if you know that the other two people who may be interviewing from, Bombay, whatever, Delhi, whatever other campus, Kharagpur, um, then this is your chance to one up those people, right? Uh, if they've always had top grades, they've always got slightly better jobs. They went to Deutsche Bank and you went to like Acme Bank, whatever. This is your chance. Okay. So if you prepare, if you take it seriously, um, you're on a level playing field and this is your springboard. All right, you get it. So, but getting back to my original point, if you're somehow caught with your, and I hate to use this expression, but with your pants down a little bit, a little unprepared, go with your gut, right? And in that way you will be confident. Don't try to make up some shit that you read somewhere on an internet forum. All right, I beat that point to death, huh? All right, so what else do you need to know? The interview is exactly 30 minutes. Now a lot of you out there may say, okay, why do I need to know that? Because when it ends suddenly right at the 30-minute mark, and I mean right at the 30-minute mark, um, don't take it as a personal offense. If they kick your ass out the door, it's because they are on a tight time schedule, um, and they don't have time. Listen, no one's that special, I suppose, but they are just whatever. They're very much on a very tight time schedule, and it's not personal. It will end suddenly. If the interview was going well, what I've seen in general, based on my last however many years of experience, um, you won't get to the part where they discuss or where you discuss why HBS, right? And that to me is often a good sign. Sometimes your goals they may not even get to or may be covered very briefly. Now remember, they know what your goals are, right? Um, they don't really care why you want to go to HBS or why. They just need to know that you are a fit with the case, within that case learning environment, right? And they know that by vetting you with the other questions about why you've made the decisions that you have made in your life, right? And how you view challenges. So no amount of why HBS, no amount of articulating super duper wow goals will convince them otherwise. You've already proven it to them or you haven't at that point. So that's why I don't really believe that the Harvard admissions committee really cares if to hear about it, right? So don't worry about it. All right. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. Expect to be interrupted, right? They do it on purpose. I know I've kind of covered this, but I just want to point this out because it is an orange line here. It is a tactic. It is a deliberate tactic. It does not mean you are answering the questions incorrectly. It does, and I mean when I say interrupted, they're not even going to wait for you to finish, right? They're going to as soon as you get that first 80% of the first sentence out, boom, they're hitting you with another question, and then you're going to talk about that, right? And they're trying to throw you off, and it begins fast. It begins on the first question that they'll ask you about, undergraduate, why you picked undergraduate, all this stuff. Now, what I've seen over the last few years, and the interview has evolved a bit over many years. So a lot of questions you may find online. There's a lot of guides that you can buy, a lot of guides put out perhaps by student organizations at Harvard. A lot of those questions, in my opinion, humble opinion, based on experience, are not relevant, right? Because you don't know the context in which those questions were asked. You don't know if they're a follow-up question. You don't know if they led with that question. You don't know what was on the resume that sparked that question or in the essay. So anyway, whatever. I'm going off topic here, but here they will interrupt you. Don't melt down. Don't think, oh God, I'm not doing a good job, right? a lot of times when you get out of the interview, you will feel like you just screwed it all up. But it's not, and then you'll start thinking about it. This is only natural. You'll start thinking about it, obsessing about it, start calling me, you'll start messaging me and emailing me, showing up to my house at 3 in the morning, knocking on the door saying, Paul, I think that I think I should have used the word which instead of the word that. I think I used too many sentence fragments. And all it is just you effing with yourself, more or less, right? You play it over and over again. So just that will happen to everyone. You could be the most confident person in the world. You'll still do that, right? Um, and you'll think, oh, they were mean to me. Well, they're doing it on purpose, right? That's it. So, and again, I cannot under I cannot overemphasize the role of confidence when you get in there. When you want to be so prepared when you get in this interview, you're like, F it. If I go in here and they chop me in half with a sword, so be it. I could not have prepared any more for this interview. And whatever happens, happens, right? So you need to be kind of relaxed like that. I don't know how you get there, but you got to get there. Usually preparation does that. And you go in there and you're like, I know Paul said there's probably going to be one question that goes sideways. Okay, I expect that, right? So you won't be caught off surprise and start sweating and all this stuff, right? Um, even if you don't know the answer, be confident as long as that's not some super controversial, you know, uh, whatever, chauvinistic answer. You'll be fine, right? Just make sure if they start asking you questions about why that's your favorite color or why that's your favorite sport, as an example, that you actually know. So don't say sailing when you've never been on a boat a day in your life, right? Just because you think that's what people at Harvard do. Give them an authentic answer. You like collecting stamps or something else nerdy. Why is that? Right? And then say it. Don't hold back. Confidence, number one. Whatever it is you're talking about is actually number two, more or less. All right. So, and also, so a lot of times, and I say right here, I do have a highlighter here, maybe, but here you can see. Oh, look at that. Whoa, that is incredible. But right here, push back respectfully if you must. Listen, why do I call that out? Because a lot of times they will say, the nature of your industry is XYZ, or what I understand about and I'm talking about you, Miss Sarah Lucas, but she will say on time, she knows a lot more than you think about your industry and your background. It's kind of scary, right? To be honest with you. But sometimes in the past, she has said, the nature of your industry is like this, or the nature of the, evolution of whatever, in India is like this, or Africa or the States or Canada, right? And and it hasn't been completely accurate, right? And she's not purporting to be an expert, but she knows it's dangerous how much she knows. So if she says something that is not true or does not jive with your understanding, because you're actually the expert, not her, in that certain area, then you need to tell her or whoever your interviewer is, actually, that's not correct. Now, I don't know if that's a deliberate tactic she may do. It might be where she kind of just says something that's a little off sometimes. And it's not just her. I'm sorry to pick on just her, but other interviews as well, other interviewers from HBS as well. You need to correct that, because if you start going down the rabbit hole of that faulty assumption that your answer is now being based on, you're screwed, right? And then later, what are you going to say towards the end? Well, I wish, or the post-interview assignment, or at the end of the, well, I wish I would have, I should have said this. It's like, why didn't you? So push back and say, no, actually, the industry has changed a bit. It's not like that. Yada yada yada. Right. So that's what I mean by don't be a wet noodle. Don't be a pushover. You need to be confident. You're the expert, right? They invited you to the dance, so get up and dance, right? And don't say no. Let me sit over here by the punch bowl, or take some faulty assumption and run with it, because you are screwed when they start asking you questions about your answer based on a faulty assumption that they made that you couldn't stand up to. All right, what else? Okay, and again, I mentioned this. I know this last piece of advice might seem a little glib, maybe a little trite, whatever other synonym. But do not tell these people what they want to hear. Do not be Listen, almost everything in life is cliche. The difference is whether or not you can back it up, right? So um if there is something from your life, I learned this lesson about I love too much, right? You can say that, right? Even if it sounds like something you want to hear. And they're going to start asking, and it must be explained. They're going to start asking you questions about it to determine whether or not you're full of shit or something you read on some website somewhere. And if you truly believe it, you will own it. You'll be confident. And even if it initially sounds cliche, it won't be towards the end, right? But the other percentage of cases, right? Do not overthink some of these answers. You need to be authentic. You need to tell them what actually went on, even if you flubbed something, even if you screwed something up, right? Do not try to put lipstick on that pig. They say, you know what, actually, this is now, if you said it was some great leadership accomplishment in your resume and essay, well, I don't know what to tell you there. But if it's something and they have a really good kind of sixth sense for something that may have not gone well, but you're maybe not, promoting on your resume or your materials, but they'll look at it and they'll look at your resume and they'll at least ask you about it. So what happened there? Why didn't you get the offer from BCG, Bain, or McKinsey? Why did you end up going to whatever firm? Did you not get the offer? And if you lie and say, "Oh, I did. I just turned it down because I wanted to go work for Uncle Joe's consulting company from the basement," right? Um, just it's going to be it's going to be a short interview, but it's going to be a very long day for you, right? So so just tell them the truth. Yeah, I screwed it up. I didn't do that well when I, during the internship, and this is why. And this is what I learned from it. So don't just say, by the way, don't give them stunted answers. I had a client a few years ago who had a bad habit of doing this, but give them like the one word or one sentence answer, make it a conversation, make it a story, right? Um, and what you want to be able to explain, like, I learned this, I learned that from it, and I feel very fortunate in some ways that I actually did screw that up back in the day or earlier in my life, not last week, because I was able to take a step back, think about what I did wrong, determine what I really wanted to do, move forward. And that's why my career trajectory, when I found my right home, my right environment, and right mentors, whatever the hell you were looking for, whatever you needed, that's when I hit this hockey stick looking graph, right? And my success trajectory was, well, whatever, was squared. All right. Um, anyway, just know, and this is just like with essays, by the way, but if you got the interview, you probably didn't do this in your essays, but I want to warn you again, just like mom does. Do not bullshit these people. Do not try to sound smart. Do not try to write smart or sound smart. I don't know why you'd be writing in the interview. Do not use big bullshit words that clearly are beyond the realm of your limited lexicon, right? Just be yourself. Listen, mom, we all know mom is thinks she's right about everything. She's probably right about most things, but she's right about this. Just be yourself here, right? Or you will be exposed. It's for your own good, right? All right, moving on. Moving on. Um, okay, again, oh wow, I'm beating this horse to death. I'm resurrecting it and beating it again. So it's just I don't know how to say this. I hate to use dating examples, right? Because I'm married, but the one thing here is like you're trying to sell yourself as a confident person. Yeah, you live in mom's basement. Yeah, you don't have a job. Yeah, you're good for nothing. But when you go out there and you're trying to talk to people, let's say it's a networking event, not speed dating, you have to sell confidence, right? You can't go there, yeah, so they that's what they need to see. That's who they're investing in. That's what they think of you, and they're like, this person in a seat at HBS, what will they be like next to all the other confident, successful, best of the best and the brightest type young leaders from around the world in this class? And if they can't see you there, so long, pal. And again, I already said this earlier. Remember when I said I was stealing from later in my presentation? Well, here it comes. Don't pull your punches in the interview or you won't do well, right? Tell them how you feel, have a freaking opinion, take a stand, don't be a wimp, don't be a wet noodle or anything like or a wallflower, right? And here we go. I used, you know, stamps a few slides ago. And I know half the people are like, I like stamps. Um, but whatever it is, train spotting, whatever, just don't change your answer to something else you think is more sophisticated or business related. A lot of times I see this with clients where they'll, tell me about a book. And Harvard doesn't ask this, but they think like this. If I'm asked about a book that I love, it has to be something business related. Hell no, it does not. You don't want it to be. That is the answer they expect. That is the answer that sucks, right? So do not tell them you love investing in the stock market. I mean, maybe you will. Or, I mean, let's face it, a lot of business school people love, that type of day trading activity, right? Um, but if you have but think about it. I once had a client who went to Harvard. She graduated. She had a collection. I forgot what it was, but it was hundreds and hundreds of books. And I'm not talking about Kindles, books that she collected. And she was hesitant to say that because a lot of the books, they weren't like weird genres or anything. I think most of them were sci-fi, right? But I said, listen, Not to stereotype, but to me, it's interesting that a young woman, even though you have an engineering background, would love Isaac Asimov or whoever else is out there writing about this stuff, right? Um, um, and she had all these hardcover books that she'd gone to these swap meets, whatever, and purchased. That is interesting. Now, it doesn't have to be leadership oriented. It doesn't have to be, a book by Jack Welch or whoever else is cool out there, Bill Gates, well, maybe not anymore. But just tell them authentically who you are. And I know I'm beating this to death, but people do not believe me when I say this. Not only does it come across as interesting as a person, as you as a person, not only can the interviewer identify with that because let's face it, they're nerds too, in some way or another, right? I'm sorry if whoever may be watching this from HBS, but we're all nerds. And you know what? Let's celebrate that. Let's own it. And when you're in the interview, tell them, right? Do not change it to anything else. All right. Um, oh, now you know who the last point here, and you know who I'm talking to, guys. With this last point, do not refer to grown women, whether you were an undergraduate or now as girls, please, just please. Um, it's not the end of the world if you do, but just be aware of this. This is something that people aren't even aware that they do, that I speak with all the time. You know who you are if I'm talking to you, but they're women, they're females, they're leaders. They're not. You don't call guys boys, do you? No. So don't do that with women. Just heads up. All right, moving on. I'll leave it at that. Next slide. Okay, so okay, so let's get into some actual questions. Okay. So what does this thing look like? What are your 30 minutes of hell? Now, what are your 30 minutes of not hell, I'm sorry, of you showing HBS exactly who you are, which should not be a scary proposition if you're a confident person. What does this look like? All right. So just start off with you just know you're always being observed, right? The eyes are always watching. And that so when you come in, they know how the game's played. They'll give you some nice how long did it take you for you to travel here when we were allowed to go outside because there wasn't a pandemic, did you attend any of the orientation or the events today on campus, whatever. Just they're trying to let your guard down, not to like stick a dagger in your back, but they're just trying to break the ice, right? So just be normal, answer the freaking questions. If you didn't go, you didn't go, right? Don't start making excuses. Well, I planned on going, but I couldn't because my plane was late. My mom said that, just yeah, I didn't have a chance, but I'd like to, whatever. That's it. Um, Remember confidence. Don't start sweating. Don't fold up like a origami swan. Okay, swan. So icebreakers. Okay, so as soon as you sit down, they used to have two interviewers before, right? Now mostly one, right? Whether that's pandemic induced or whatever, more people are doing Skype interviews. That was very extensive last year because of, um, but when they used to have two, and I don't know if they're going to go back to that era, uh, a lot of times in the beginning, they would say, instead of saying walk me through your resume, they would just say introduce yourself. Just introduce yourself, which is not a resume walkthrough. It's just like, hey, I'm Bob. I'm da da da. But they would also, hey, I'm interviewer one. This is my associate here, interviewer two. They're new. They haven't gone through your candidacy, your app, your profile. Why don't you introduce you to her or him, right? And so, it's just kind of something that a little twist to throw you off, but whatever. So, or they'll start off even more direct than that. And by the and like I said a few minutes ago, they know exactly what they're going to ask before you walk in there, right? Um, they know all your fears and weaknesses, right? So really, they're gonna say, I was really intrigued by your essay. And by the way, they tend I'll get into this. I'm jumping all over the place, but they tend not to ask so many questions about your essay because they know you spent months. I think my theory, they know you've spent months preparing for that stuff or writing that stuff. They liked it. It's very polished. So they tend not to ask a lot of questions around that, right? All right. But if something is of personal interest or just intriguing to the interviewer, no bullshit, they will ask you about it, right? And again, this is very early on. These are softballs, right? They're just lobbing this in there, seeing how well you do. Still breaking the ice. So I was really intrigued by your essay and your background growing up. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you got into your current industry, right? Or what it was like growing up on Mars or, anyway, whatever. Um, sometimes they'll start off by asking you something obscure from the very bottom of your your essay, the part where you put like yodeling expert, right? Underwater basket weaver. I said, like, that's really intriguing. I once knew a guy who did that, right? What is that like? Everybody that I've ever known who's been a underwater basket weaver has actually done it underwater, but you do it on ground. How do you adapt to that, right? How do you adapt to air? So so just know that yes, it is an actual interview question. Yes, they are gauging your response, but it's more just to break the ice, of course, and just see. It's the beginning of the wet noodle test, right? All right. So overall, just know before we start getting into the next slides and before your interview, Harvard must know how you make decisions, right? So if your answers are 5, 10 seconds long, one or two sentences, you're probably not telling them how you think, how you make decisions, how you're demonstrating a consistent history of making decisions and going after challenges. You're not doing that, right? Instead, it's this kind of like Pavlovian experiment, right? They should have just brought a bell and rung it for you. So anyway, and again, have a conversation, ask for clarity. If they ask you a question that does not make sense to you, even if you need to buy a few seconds because you're like, oh shit, I was hoping they wouldn't ask me this and they asked me this, right? Just ask for clarity. Like, it's okay to say, are you looking for something more like this? For example, if you've already given an answer that involves leadership example number one, and they're asking another question that really the best answer is leadership, example number one, what you can say is give them leadership example number two, of course, and you should have probably 3 or 4 stories ready to go. But what you should do is, if you do not have that at all, you know what the confident person does, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, is they say, I actually do not, sorry, Sarah, sorry, Chad, sorry, whoever, I actually do not have that that specific example from work or outside of work or from wherever, but I do have something I believe is similar. Would you like to hear about that? Right now, they could say no, and then you have to be prepared for that eventuality. But here's the thing, they're not actually interested in the answer so much as really how you conduct yourself, right? So if you don't have the answer, you don't have the answer, and they know that. And there's been a situation like this before. So basically, they allowed that person to tell them, yeah, sure, tell me about that experience. Now you are the conductor. So that is doing that. You may think, excuse my French here, maybe ballsy, right? But it shows absolute confidence. So does humor, by the way, but it shows absolute confidence. You took command of a kind of an uncertain gray area, and ultimately, that's what they're trying to evaluate: how you make decisions here on in the moment and throughout your career. And you ran with it, right? And I don't see a reason why they would actually say no. Tell me what I asked for, even though that you don't have it. But they reward that. They like if you read interviews with the old director of admissions, Miss Deidre Leopold, D. Leopold. Um, she tells stories about people who come in demonstrating confidence in some way. There's a story out there about a guy with a shirt. It was too big for him. She asked him, "What's up with your wrinkled shirt?" He said, "I forgot my white shirt. I ran down to the street this morning. I paid a guy $100 for a white shirt who was just walking by on his way to work." And she says in the interview, um, it's an interview with a newspaper and an interview with a prospective applicant. So how's that for confusion? But she says, that's when I knew that guy was getting into Harvard, HBS. There you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, all you have to do is run down the stairs, buy a shirt off somebody on the street that's 3 sizes too large. Hopefully it's stained and you're in. Seriously, though, seriously. Um, that guy could have lied. That guy could have made something up and been like, "Oh, I used to be fat," or something like that, or my, dry cleaner messed it up. But he told the story, and that exhibits confidence, and it also exhibits thinking on your feet, by the way. But being able to tell that story, so it's and there's a little bit of humor in there, self-deprecating humor, but that's fine. That's the best kind because it's humble humor. Anyway, all of it sums up to confidence. Let's move on. All right. So, did I make a? Okay, here. So here's some more actual questions. Undergraduate experience, and um, I'm gonna go through some of the logic here in a second on the next slide. But listen, they're gonna start off. They usually go in chronological order a lot of the time, right? Sometimes they'll completely skip your. By the way, sometimes they'll completely skip all undergraduate questions and they'll go straight into work if that's what they're really interested in. So if you have a cut and dry experience undergrad, they may not ask you about it, right? So so again, if they are asking about your undergraduate experience, it'll be questions about why did you choose your specific campus? Why did you choose your specific major? And listen, if you go to a school, And the IITians know what I'm talking about. If you go to a school where it's either you got to pick the campus or the major, and you don't really get both, it's one or the other. You need to tell them that. First off, they know that, right? But if you try to snow them with some bullshit answer, right? They're gonna be like, "What the fuck," you know? And so just know. But be honest, just explain stuff, and then they start looking. They start it's like they're hunting, right? And they start looking. Okay, answered that question pretty well, pretty well. Ah, I noticed a little bit of an opportunity here. This is what they're thinking to ask them. So if you say something that's inconsistent, like, well, you know, I like, for example, some people do get their campus when at IIT and their major, right? And if you got both and you say you got both and you didn't explain, like I was one of the lucky ones that got both, immediately they'll pick up on that and they'll ask you a question about that, right? So that's why this is a very hard interview to prep for. And that's why at a high level, don't be full of shit. Know your stuff, you'll be fine. And more importantly than knowing your stuff, be confident when you say it, right? Even if you don't think it's the right answer, just say it. All right. So okay, but going back to the top part here, general idea is that you chose for as much as the learning was rigorous and as much as you learn inside the classroom, you experienced a lot of personal and leadership growth outside of it. You became a man, you became a woman, from a boy or from a girl, whatever. um, and and you saw this is coming of age experience as an undergrad where you learned the value of going after challenges. Don't be the all-knowing 8 or 10-year-old. Don't be little Buddha, right? If that is offensive to anybody, forgive me. But as an example, don't be somebody who was enlightened at the age of 6. I always knew I loved challenges because my dad or my mom or my older brother or older sister told me so. Don't No, 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 no. They may have showed you that, but they probably had to spank you to get you to do it, right? It's only become when you become an adult do you really have the maturity to make good decisions and go after leadership opportunities and challenges on your own, right? Because you want to, not because you're going to get paddled. Anyway, so they will. So as an example, when they ask you, they'll throw a kind of a general question out there. So Bob, what was your undergraduate slash graduate experience like, right? How'd you choose your campus essay? Why'd you pick the major? Why a dual degree? Why would you do that, right? So if you have something like econ and then you have material science, those things arguably could be at different ends of the spectrum. What's up with Jekyll Hyde? um, Explain that, right? I've always kind of had a fascination with the material science. I knew would, like, for example, engineering degree, material science. I knew that would pay the bills. I had to do that. I didn't grow up wealthy, right? But econ is really where my passion lay. I mean, I didn't know it necessarily at the time. It was just something I thought was cool, something I thought I could be interested in. Really, overall, my undergraduate experience was a time for self exploration, right? And figuring out what I wanted to do. So, for those of you out there who may have a little bit of a schizophrenic undergraduate experience where you were involved in a lot of different little things, and there isn't one main thrust, like you were leader of this club and then you were leader of that club, but the clubs are at completely opposite ends of the spectrum. It's okay because the unifying theme is leadership, right? And also, this is the time when you are figuring things out. Anyway, I digress, as I always do. Um, so, yeah, why'd you even pick a combined master's program? Great. They will ask this question, or they will ask a question about, listen, if you got an engineering degree or some type of science degree, humanities degree, and then you went and worked for Bain, BCG, McKinsey, why would you do that? Right? Beyond the fact that it may be hard to do, they're like, what drew you to that major? You have an art history degree. Um, and you can honestly say, like, it was extremely tough job environment, very hard to get environment, very hard to get a job in that, right? That's 5% of your answer. The other 95% of your answer, when you answer something, you have to tell them how you think. So, because there's so many other jobs out there, right, that you could potentially do, and you would tell them, I looked around, I was talking to people, I knew some consultants. So just walk them through that, right? And don't say, like, I always knew I wanted to be a consultant. That's why I got an art history degree. It doesn't make any sense, right? They'll call bullshit. So be honest. Um, and again, always expect to be interrupted. um, they're always hunting. It's almost like they're not even listening to what you're saying, except for the fact that they're looking for a gap that they can exploit. Now, if you show a weakness or a hesitation, or if they think you're bullshitting, that's where they start drilling. So that's why you need to be honest. All right. So here we go. I call this, listen, this whole drilling down thing, this whole extensive follow-up thing, it's like it's like when sharks kind of smell blood in the water. I mean, it's not that scary, but it's kind of close. But what they'll do is they just want to know. They know you're prepping for this interview, like your life depended on it, and they're going to ask questions that are the result of the conversation that is occurring in real time, right? So that's how you kind of want to practice. Um, so, I call this the dirty D's, right? It is this damn deep drill down, right? How's that? Humor for you. Anyway, um, and again, like I said, Miss Sarah Lucas, Chad Lowe's, they know more about the industry that you think. I don't know if they're reading up before it or somebody, whatever, but they've been around the block a few times, right? So it doesn't mean they're experts, but just know that, right? So and but also know there are not a lot of questions about. Tell me about why the percentage of women in computer science at Cisco is not as high as men. Yada yada. They're not going to ask you questions about that. It's not those type of expert questions, but they will ask you for your opinion about the industry, and we come to an example here in a few slides. Anyway, um, so another tactic I've noticed, and I probably should have numbered these, right? But the second paragraph here on page 9, expect numerous questions about a project or something you worked on that you may have placed lower, like jammed into the middle of your resume that, you may not have paid too much attention to in your essays, on the resume, in the rest of your app. Maybe it happened, maybe it was your first project. Like a tactic that I've seen is they'll ask you, first project at BCG, first project at Bain. Tell me about that one. And you're like, oh, damn it. That's why it's damn deep drill down, right? But the way that so they're doing that because they know what's going on right now in your latest and greatest project. They expect that you expect them to ask you about that project that you can highlight and brag about and your mom and dad are proud of you about, right? But when they go back to that first one and they're like, how did you choose that project? Well, if you didn't get to choose it, say I didn't get to choose it, right? I got maybe to choose my subsequents. But when they'll start drilling down into that, right? And if you're caught off guard, boom, here we go. You know. Um, anyway, so what are other interviewer tactics at HBS that I've kind of seen? Okay, they have a sense for what you're not going to be as prepared to talk about. They'll pick that, they'll drill down, right? Um, if you mention something, by the way, in the additional section, like I love baking, or I love sewing, or I love mountaineering, they will ask you about that, especially if they're interested in it. They're person, say, "Oh, baking. Oh, yeah. So, what? To tell me, like, you listed that as a hobby here. So, tell me, like, what's your experience in it?" And if you're like, it looks stupid. It looks like you're full of shit. So just make sure anything you're putting on there, even if it's one word like golf, right? That you do have it, or you can at least articulate why it's meaningful. Maybe just play with your girlfriends or your guy friends or whoever to talk about it, right? Maybe your grandpa was a PGA tour member, whatever, right? Um, so anyway, what else? They drill down in this experience, something you may not be as prepared about by asking a series of probing questions. They're going to look for your response. They're not necessarily looking at truthfulness, even though they know if you're probably lying. But what they're looking for is, oh man, this person. It's like a human lie detector test, right? Or not a lie detector, human nervousness test. They're like, oh, okay, person seems a little shaky. Let me ask him another question. So, and really, what the way I would view it is something I said earlier. These are opportunities to kind of redeem yourself a little bit, right? Finally, they're going to think like, finally, he or she gave me a good answer, right? So clear it up, explain it. Even if you have to over explain it a little bit, just explain it. Get ahead. Like they're looking to see, does this person anticipate what I'm hunting for, what I'm looking for? Are they explaining it enough so I get it, right? And then once you explain it, boom, they'll move on. They'll move on. They'll drop you like a bad habit. Like that last thing that you guys just talked about for 5 minutes, done, right? Moving on. And again, if you are getting questioned, it's not a bug. It's not necessarily even because you're screwing up, even though that's kind of what's in this example. It's because they know that is where you're probably nervous. But if you do a good job, they'll just move on to something else. But if you are a little shaky, they'll keep drilling, right? And again, the whole interruption thing, and I cannot emphasize this enough, it is not an assessment of you. It is something they've already planned, right? Um, and of course, you could be rambling. All right, so what else? Okay, so they tend to ask about leadership experiences, but really like why you chose those leadership experiences, right? What you got out of those leadership experiences for example, they'll ask a question about your legacy. But here, undergraduate experiences beyond why you chose that school, beyond why you chose the major, they will ask, you managed. So just think about this, right? You listed all that fancy schmancy stuff, all these pretty leadership activities, roles, and awards, right? And then they're going to start off with the softball. Hey, you managed a number of responsibilities at university. Describe them to me. Now, let's say you listed four, or there's five, right? Um, or for somebody with your background, there's typically four or five from undergraduate leadership opportunities, and you only list three. They're going to say, well, why didn't you take on, we've seen from other people is that they take on leadership responsibility four and five, or they do an exchange overseas or something. Why didn't you do that? Okay, whoa, tell me the story there. So, so just know that it's almost like the things that you don't write about, they or list, they pick up on that and they start asking you about that as an extension, right? It's almost like they have this sixth sense again. So here, why did you choose? And again, they're vetting your decision making. Why did you choose the leadership roles in organizations that you did? Now, if you start telling them something like, I wanted to conquer the world, I wanted to make campus mine, okay, well, you better have a good answer when they start vetting that, because it sounds like bullshit. When they start asking, you better have some good answers, right? I would encourage you just to say, honestly, it just piqued my interest. I thought it would be interesting. I went after it, and you know what? I actually developed a passion for it, right? But I didn't know that going into it, and that's a totally honest, reasonable answer. So, why did you run for the specific offices that you did? So, let's say never had there been a purple person, left-handed purple person elected to this office in this club, and you were the first one, and you wrote that on your resume, right? They're not going to ask you like, what was that like being the first purple left-handed person to win this office? They're going to ask you, hey, as a purple left-handed person, one of the only few that I've ever met in my life, knowing that one had never been elected before, why would you even bother, right? What was going through your head? Tell me how you thought about it, right? So they're more interested in what led up to a lot of these things, your decisions, as opposed to tell me how awesome it was when you were the leader, right? Um, Now, was there a big shift in mindset for you when you went from being okay? So a lot of people will talk about sports captain of this team, cricket team, captain of squash team, captain of whatever, um, and they'll say, I won this championship here, and then they'll say elected team captain year three, right? And, this is a question one might not expect. What changed for you other than the obvious when you went from being a great player to a great coach, right? What challenges did you face, right? The people that were your peers that you were playing next to, yada, 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 that you were homies with, when you had to begin leading them, was there any type of controversy? Or did you make any change that frankly pissed them off, right? So just be prepared for those types of questions. And those are questions that you really wouldn't think they'd be asking to drill into, right? So, but if you did it and you've prepared, you should have those answers. Another question, you wrote about founding the Society for Fuzzy Pets during undergraduate, right? And you may think like they may ask you, well, what did you do? What did you do in that role? Or why do you care so much about fuzzy pets? Those are the questions you might think that they would ask. But no, 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 no. Haha. Surprise. Who supported the establishment of the organization among students? How about other clubs? How about external partners? How about the schools, the university's administration? Right? What pushback did you face? You asked them. Oh, you said you asked them for $500,000 for a fuzzy pet rescue. Must have been a lot of fuzzy pets, right? So, so it must have been a lot of fur. So what? You know, they just gave you the $500,000 and you're like, well, no. Okay. Well, then resistance. You faced budgeting resistance. The school's admin couldn't give you that money. So how'd you raise the rest of it? Why did you approach the people that you did? How did you find those people? Tell me how you found those people, those donors that you approached, right? What was if the school you said the school had the money? Well, why wouldn't they give it to you? What do you think you could have improved in your approach, your pitch to those people when you needed that money? Right? The end, right? So it's like, oh my God, what is wrong with this person? And, when you're going, you thinking that about the interviewer, but that's what they do. But if it actually happened, if you're actually a self-aware, all-knowing person, but not Buddha, you will have answers, right? And if you're not sure, if you don't remember because it's so long ago, say say that. Don't just be like a beat it. Go through and say, give me a second. Let me think about this. Sarah, Chad, whoever else. This is a great question, right? And you say, let me think about it for a second, because this is a few years ago. Now, don't take too much time because they will move on to the next question. They'll be like, this has happened before in a bad interview with a client who was not prepared for many other reasons. Won't get into it. But Chad said to this person, right? Or, someone like Chad said to this person, um, you know what? When they couldn't answer a question, why don't you think about that for a few minutes and maybe we'll come back. Let's go on to the next question. That, my friends, is not a good thing to hear coming out of Chad, right? But anyway, so here, just know that if you need time, if you're not sure, you need to have the confidence to say, "Give me a second. Is it a little while ago? I'm not sure." Like, don't take 5 seconds, but it's like, "I'm not sure, Chad, Sarah, whoever, of the exact dollar amount, but I think it was this." Right? So again, if you're not sure, say you're not sure. That's confidence. That doesn't make you look like an idiot. It's like 5, 6, 7 years ago. That makes you look confident, right? So anyway, just know that's another way of pushing back in a nice way. You're giving yourself a little bit of an out, but you're qualifying your statements. You're like, I don't remember if it was 99 cents or a dollar. All right. Now, what is your lasting? Oh, so okay, let's go back to the Society for Fuzzy Pets. How many people attended? You wrote about that one conference you organized, first ever fuzzy pet conference at your undergraduate. How many people attended? And you're like, "What?" Now, this is just a question that you don't expect, but depending on your answer, they will ask more. So if you're like, "Oh, it's awesome, attended," and you know what I did? I had to learn a lot of SEO. I had to learn a lot of SEM. I had to learn a lot of yada yada to get people there. I even knocked on doors. I even made phone calls in the middle of the night. That's what they want to see you say or expand upon, right? And if they don't, they'll interrupt you. That's fine, right? But you need to have those answers ready to go, right? You need to know what the hell went on. Now, the other thing to say is the organization still there? Now, if the organization is not still there, right, and it was something you were proud of, just say, unfortunately, it's not, right? For the first couple of years I was involved, I handed it off. Um, and you could say like don't be like, yeah, it's not there. Okay, first off, we already know the answer. Do not lie and say that it is there because they will check, right? They're not going to call the 800 number for the fuzzy pet rescue at your undergraduate university, but they'll look, oh, website's not there. That's not weird. And they may even say, I noticed the website wasn't there, or I noticed it doesn't seem like they're active anymore. What happened? And so if they are active, but they just suck at website stuff, then say that, right? But also, if it's not there, say it's not there and just say, unfortunately, because of work, because of life, because I'd graduated a year or two afterwards, it kind of fizzled out, and that's one of my actual regrets, even though they didn't ask you about this. One of my regrets from undergrad that I didn't do perhaps a better job of transitioning and handing that off and making sure that the organization could survive without me, right? And they'll probably ask you another question about that, right? Maybe what would you have done differently, right? Well, I would have created a training manual, yada yada. But just remember, own it. Don't try to skirt out of it or around it. All right. What is your lasting legacy at university? Why do you view it as such? So if you left something there, and let's get move on from the fuzzy pet rescue. But if you're something there that you left, some mentorship program, you were the first to do that or whatever. Remember, lasting legacy at university is not I was the smartest guy or gal in the room. It could be that, but you need to have like, what is the greater impact on the colleagues or classmates that came after you? Did you open up more opportunities for women to step into leadership roles on your campus because you were the first woman or left-handed purple person to do something, to crack the core committee of some club? Um, so yeah, so just know, right? And why do you view it as such? I mean, some of these answers may be obvious, but if it's not clear to the interviewer, they're gonna push you on it. Or if it's somewhat unconventional, they'll dig, keep digging. All right, moving on. Okay, so work experience again, they will ask you about when you should have zigged, when everybody else, remember, they're looking for people who look for challenges, who seek challenges, who are challenge loving. So they tend to ask you not why you chose this path, but why you didn't choose this other path. I don't know if this makes sense. They'll ask you, why did you choose the path less traveled? We don't see this that often. So look at all things on your resume and your profile. Look at all things that are maybe slightly unconventional. That's where they tend to dig, right? Maybe I should have told you that earlier. But so first time role after graduating, you have a degree in underwater basket weaving. Why pursue a job in consulting, right? Um, and then they'll also say, especially for some of you tech folks out there, they will ask you like, okay, and this is kind of a test to put you on the spot. Explain to me like a 5-year-old, or rather in the clearest terms possible, what your company does, right? So if it's something complicated like AI or whatever else is complicated or new and shiny, something that they may not know as much about, something, or maybe you're just smart guy or gal, very leadership accomplished, but holy moly, you're talking about all these acronyms on your resume. They're going to say straight up, challenge you, tell me one or two sentences, clearest terms possible, what on earth your company does. Now, so they'll go through and they'll say, all right, remember, they're looking for the kind of the outliers, the unconventional stuff. So if you're in a role, let's say as a consultant, excuse me, your first job after graduating, and you wrote on there, I managed 50 people, 20 people. I had a military guy one time. He managed a bunch of EOD, whatever, explosive ordnance disposal people. I forgot how many there were, a couple hundred. He was mentoring, managing eventually, whatever it was. It's not really that usual, maybe in his role, but they asked him a lot about that. Another thing they asked him was, he said he had budgetary responsibility over like some minimal budget, like 25,000 bucks. There you go. That's what you get in the military, right? But it's not normal for a sailor or somebody in the military to have that responsibility. So they asked him, what is budgeting or management responsibility, whatever responsibility, yada yada, in your your role entail? Tell us about that. What's so difficult? Now, he's expecting questions about, you know, saving lives or taking over countries or whatever. But they asked him about that because A, they knew he wouldn't be comfortable answering it, right? He was prepared, but they also knew, just remember, think, what are the outliers? What's something that's a bit unconventional? What's something they may not see every day? Boom, that's what they're probably going to ask you about. So anyway, like if you're a consultant, you're saying you manage 50 people somewhere, or you did something really, really impactful. Like why would they choose you to do that? You were still wet around the ears, as they say. You still, you're a noob. How did you get to managing 50 people? And you need to be able to explain that, right? And tell me, like, so when you're 23-year-old female and you're working in an automotive plant of on average 45 to 50-year-old males, with one set of teeth among them, and they're like, what were the challenges associated with it? How do you build rapport with those people? Tell me, right? And you should be able to tell them, of course. So, all right. And then, of course, these are interesting questions at the bottom here. Industry, company specific questions, right? So, right here. So it's like, they used to ask this question. They asked this question quite a bit right here with the brick and mortar. This is a few years ago, so a little stale, but the point still stands here, which is they'll ask you for your educated opinion on a certain industry, and they'll look to see if it jives with their understanding, right? And like, are brick and mortar stores doomed? I mean, is there really a right answer to that? I think there are more educated answers than not, but there is no one right answer. And again, they're not looking for a right answer. They're not looking to say you're wrong. They're looking to see how you articulate and walk them through why you feel that they aren't doomed, why you feel that there'll always be um, a, a whatever. I do feel like, though, and why I put this in here in the example, is that with COVID, if you are working for some sort of retailer, or you have done projects with brick and mortar e-commerce, they may ask you this question, especially given the pandemic. So there you go. Maybe it's not relevant as one might think. All right, again, and so they, again, educated opinion. You should be prepared. Now, this type of question, by the way, the reason I put it on here is not only because it's relevant, but it does tend to scare the shit out of people, right? Like, oh my god, I'm like, dude, you are at work all day doing this stuff, right? Are you telling me you don't have an opinion? Forget you're interviewing. If I were to ask you right now, are brick and mortar stores doomed? Every single person listening to this presentation, even if you don't work in at the Gap, right, or Old Navy or Banana Republic or Zara, you should have an opinion on that, right? Even if you're not an expert, it may not be the most robust opinion, but think about that. And you're like, what would I say if somebody asked me a question like that? Um, and that being said, I don't know what my answer would be. But anyway, so let's look at the next bullet point. I see you implemented XYZ strategy, product, service while working at a client. And this is again kind of consulting oriented. Why weren't they doing that already? So you see this? You see what they're doing here? You see, they're not going to ask you, why did you go that route? They may ask you that, why did you decide to do this? But they'll be like, that seems kind of obvious that they were doing that. A big company like that, a big company like the Gap or Walmart, why on earth weren't they doing it? Why did it take little old you to come along and tell them the emperor has no clothes? Like, tell them that this is what you folks need to do. And, granted, you're 22, 23, however, 25 years old doing it. Why would they listen to you? Of course, or what options did you give them? Why did they pick that one option? Was that the option that you recommended? If they picked the option you did not recommend, what were their reasons? What do you think you could have done to get them to go the other way, right? But they'll also say again, and this is a, why weren't you doing it already? This is they're soliciting your opinion as to what the company. And listen, a bad answer, you say, well, I don't know because I wasn't there, before I got there. I didn't have a time machine to go back and see what decisions they did or did not make. Bad answer, right? And you could say, but there's two approaches. You could say, well, this is one specific company that's an outlier. Walmart wasn't doing this. They didn't have a good, robust online e-commerce site because yada yada yada. They're in Arkansas, whatever. And no, nothing against Arkansas. But, you could say, listen, in this industry, generally, with these types of brick and mortars, they were a little late to the game, right? Because things were going so well. And by the time they realized they needed to have e-commerce, right? You could take that kind of more industry approach, or you could take the company specific approach. But certainly, this is a question that I could easily see people get caught with their pants down, right? Caught by surprise. And I would say, dude, whatever answer, usually, like, let's say you're really strapped and you're really nervous for some reason, the answer that pops in, why weren't they doing it in their answer? You're like, well, I'm not, I don't know for sure, but what I've seen, and then it's just like, come on, like, tell them granted, you're an educated person, but just don't try to overthink it and make things up. Usually in these instances, and I kind of cringe when I say this, your gut instinct is right. Well, they weren't doing it because they were stupid, right? Okay, okay. That's not a bad answer. I don't know if you want to say stupid, but there's something there. Okay. Well, they weren't as educated as they needed to be about these decisions. So tell me a little bit more. Yeah, and you're kind of, this is an internal monologue, by the way. You'd be like, really, I feel like personally, based, especially on based on what I've seen afterwards, that Walmart or Target or whatever fake company or target example company we're talking about here, they didn't really have the systems to hire these types of talent, and there wasn't a lot available in Minnesota, where Target's from, Arkansas, where Walmart's from, and I can see, and I believe that that had a lot to do with it. Now expect them to follow up and ask you questions, and you know, and whatever. So maybe the story does fall apart in the end, but it will fall apart at the beginning. You'll never get to those last questions if you're like, man, I don't know, I really don't have an answer, right? Give them the gut answer, right? You worked there, didn't you? Okay. All right. So um, here's another one that I've seen before several times. Educated opinion question. Given you said yada yada is a successful mission driven company, what are their challenges, opportunities and challenges on the horizon? So and so they've also asked, like, you work at the Banana Republic company in San Francisco, or Guess in Los Angeles. Tell me who tell me why, like, tell me why Forever 21 is doing better than, I don't think they are anymore, but tell me why Forever 21 is doing better than or not, then Guess, right? And tell them, right? Make it into a conversation. Okay, I've 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 beat that to death. All right, so let's see what other questions that I see. These are common type questions. Can you tell me about the acquisition opportunities of finance person you worked on your resume? Again, see how it's a very softball general question, right? Then here comes the hunter. What was your role, right? And they'll look and they'll see. Okay, they're asking this question, by the way, because on the resume they'll see that, oh, Joe Schmo played a really significant role for this private equity venture capital company, right? In this, during this acquisition, it says he played a lead role, right? As an analyst, as a junior analyst. We don't typically see that. Remember, a little bit of the outlier. So they'll say, so they know what they're asking here. So what was your role? What was your role, Joe Schmo? And Joe will be like, hey, it's a great opportunity, yada, yada, yada. And I'll say, well, here's the thing, Joe Schmo. And again, it's not because they think you're lying. They're giving you an opportunity to prove yourself here. Based on what we typically see of junior analysts named Joe working at competitor companies, it's not usually, same. And that's when the less confident among the interviewees will melt down and poop their pants, right? But that's where somebody who owns it and be like, actually, no, Sarah, Chad, whatever, whatever your name is, um, I totally understand where you're coming from. Remember, if they say something that's controversial, something that you don't agree with or believe in, say, like, I totally understand how 99% of Harvard interviewers could see it that way, but here's the actual reality. So again, have the guts, the confidence, the wherewithal to push back and say no in a respectful way, right? Um, and so, are these responsibilities typical to your role at your company? Were they new to you, right? So anyway, and this gentleman was answering. He just got going. He's two or three sentences into it, and then straight up, it's like, so what exactly did you do? If you're rambling, or did you help select the target firm? So even if you worked on the deal, were you part of the process to select that that target? Were there 10 and you helped them narrow it down to two? And if the answer is yes, Then they'll be like, okay, well, tell me, like, why would they put somebody so young in that role? And you may think that's kind of an asshole question to ask, pretty obnoxious. Well, that's life, right? But trust me, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you can't handle that type of question in an interview, what are you going to do when you get to Harvard and somebody's up in your face, telling you, somebody named Karen, telling you, or Chad, telling you, you're wrong, right? So you need to defend yourself in a nice, respectful way. Um, was it difficult to merge your organizations? Now, why would they ask this question? Because on the resume, probably the client said they had to do this post-merger integration type stuff, right? And that's not necessarily typical, depending on whatever firm, private equity versus venture capital, but Acme versus North Star. Um, but so they're going to say, like, what role did you play? So are you at an arm's length? Are you actually in there rolling up the sleeves, turning the wrenches? Okay. Um, so again, is this typical of your title? Right, that's a big clue. They're looking for the outliers, and they're going to expose you. All right. Remember, the HBS interviewer is always looking for more opportunities to ask you questions. We know this. Yeah, if you answer questions holistically and with confidence, they'll nod their head. They'll be like, okay, very nice, and they'll move on. Right. Um, Again, that's why you got to anticipate and tell the whole story, right? And if they don't want the whole story, they'll be like, okay, let's move on to the next question, right? And don't take it as a personal offense if they interrupt you, you rambler. Anyway, um, okay, here we go. Expect to be asked questions based on content in your recommendation. Keep in mind, keep in mind, you are not supposed to know what your recommender wrote about you in your recommendation. Now, I'm not going to get into that anymore because that's potentially a minefield, and this is being recorded forever. Things on the internet don't tend not to go away. But seriously, folks, you're not supposed to know. I mean, you're not supposed to know exactly what they wrote, but you are supposed to know what they would say are your strengths and what they would say is something you needed to work on. Why? Well, especially with a constructive criticism, aka weakness, they've told you about it, as I mentioned a few minutes ago earlier in the presentation. But if you start spitting back word for word what your boss wrote, so if your boss said you're a great communicator, yeah, you can say, he says I'm a good communicator, right? And explain why. You can even have the reasons be similar, right? Because he's praised or she's praised you about it before. Okay, it's consistent. But if you are so short-sighted as to repeat the same exact things, right? Or to make it look like you're just reeling it off. And I'm not talking about lying or not lying, but there is. I know that applicants give their bosses the pointers a lot of times, right? Don't be stupid here. Just come across as honest. Be honest, right? And that's it. So, and listen, the interviewer here has read everything word for word. I'm not going to go that too far into it, but anyway, here's the point. Here's the point. The point is, Sarah or Chad will say, your recommender, or Eileen will say, your recommender, your direct manager said you were a great asset. They said that. Uh, and this is that you don't say, yeah, I know. Um, why do you think, said you're a great asset? Why would they hire you out of all the pretty boys and girls that came up here and why would they hire you? And if you're the only person in that town that they could hire, then say it, right? But let's say your boss wrote about something like how it's a very competitive job and they interviewed hundreds of applicants and yada yada. That's probably why they're asking this. But say, like, I don't exactly know. And again, here's a very honest way to answer a question like this without going into too many details. It's like, why they hired me? Well, I'm awesome. No, you would say, well, I don't know exactly why, like who else I was interviewing against, right? But despite, sometimes they'll ask this question because remember, you're an art history major interviewing for a consulting position, right? A very competitive consulting position. And, I'd say, well, I didn't know that I was under the gun. I was very surprised to even get the interview in the first place. And when I went in there, I was very honest. I told them I did not have this experience. I did not have, but I had something similar. Or I told them that I said, I acknowledged fundamentally I don't have all the experience that probably a lot of other people had, but I had all these leadership experiences or these experiences where I was overcoming obstacles or turning lemons into lemonade, and how I'd done all these different things. And I think it connected, especially with one of the interviewers, Big Bob, right? and he was nodding his head. And he actually told me that we had some commonalities in like a desire to bring running water to every village in Canada, right? So there was a lot of kind of commonalities and things like that. It was a great conversation. I was, I thought it was a great conversation. I thought I did well. Again, I didn't know who I was competing against. I thought I was kind of coming up on a lot of the hard skills, spreadsheeting skills. Um, but I was surprised when I made round two, and then the rest is history, right? And so what's the bottom line? What's the bottom line, Elaine, Chad, Sarah? I think it's my ability to figure things out in the end. Um, that ultimately they saw in that interview, and ultimately what they've praised me about subsequently, probably on my letters of recommendation, even though I haven't seen them, of course. And that's it, right? So they're looking to see. So this is a test of self-awareness, right? Um, Not of how well you and your recommender may have coordinated, but just like if why. So they won't say like they won't usually say what did they praise you about on your recommendation. Tell me what word for. They won't say that, but they'll say here. This is a kind of a ass backwards way of asking. You know, they said you're a good asset. Why did they hire you? Now keep in mind they probably said that the applicant's resourcefulness, right? The ability to take something and run with it, the ability to figure out gray areas, the ability to think on their feet, whatever, right? They saw a glimpse of that in the interview through my past experiences, and they praised me about it. And that's what I've done. That's why I'm awesome and successful. And that's why you should accept me to your illustrious Harvard Business School. All right. What else? Your recommender wrote, and they will say this, that you had some hurdles to overcome. And this is a constructive criticism answer. When you first came on board, they said you kind of stumbled a little bit. What were your initial challenges? How'd you address them? Right now, obviously, your boss spent a lot of time writing what the weakness was, or the stumble, or the mishap, and how you addressed them. Um, Now, they want to see again your self awareness, and if your idea of what you did to improve is consistent in some way, right? So maybe your boss just mentioned some training, and maybe you're going into the details of some training or program or something that you did, right? You stop picking your nose and you go into the details of how you put whatever on your finger so you wouldn't pick your nose, right? And maybe your boss says, I told him or her to stop picking their nose, and eventually they did, and I could tell they were listening to me, right? So one is a little broader, one is a little more detailed, right? But they have to kind of be on the same plane, demonstrate responsiveness, yada yada yada. Um, all right, anyway, so this is a whole awareness thing. So what do I write here in orange? Expect to be asked questions about what you stated were your most significant accomplishments and significant challenges. Yeah, so anytime okay, anytime your boss writes significant challenges, significant accomplishments, you list them on your something similar on your resume, and even in your essays, you list, but in particular on the online application form. So here, when I'm saying significant challenges, significant accomplishments, remember how you wrote this on the online app? Remember there was that section? Remember? Yeah, I forgot how many characters it was, 200. Divide that by 6, that's how many words. Remember, you wrote that, right? And so they will start asking you, like, so you were the youngest in a room full of old people. Is that normal for working at an old people's home, right? So they will start digging into that to see if you're, same deal, right? But they'll only start digging into it if it's something a little not off, but unusual, right? Anyway, you stated in your application that the biggest challenge was gaining the credibility of your seniors. How'd you do that, right? And so go for it. And this should be a quick, dirty answer, right? You should be completely relaxed. If you stated it, you should know it. It's the things where they throw you curveballs because they're looking at things that are a little unconventional, little outliers. Those are things you have to worry about, and those are things you should focus on when you study. So when you're going through your resume and you're looking at all the things that you've done and all the things you've listed on your application and even things on your essay, even though they tend not to ask you about things on your essay, that I've noticed in the last couple of years, 3 years. What I will say is that as you're going through your resume, have somebody else look at it maybe and think, okay, what were the things that I did here that look a little unusual or that I know are unusual or people have told me are unusual, right? Art history major joins an investment bank, right? Or you were you were killing it, making money as a trader on Wall Street, and then all of a sudden you stopped and you went and started working for the United Way. Okay, stop the music. What the hell? They're definitely going to ask you about that transition. why you did it, all that stuff. And there are certainly traditional, realistic answers, but they're going to say, like, if you say something like, well, my colleagues warned me. So example, BCG, going to the social impact practice, or going to work for, Bay in India, you're going to work for some nonprofit or something like that. And people are like, don't go there. That's where careers go to die. And you telling the interviewee or the interviewer, you did that despite these warnings from mom and dad, your bosses, your colleagues. Don't go there. It's half the pay. It sucks. People there are stupid. And they're going to say, so why'd you go? And of course, the answer is somewhat around like, I knew that's exactly where I needed to be because that's where the challenges were and all that stuff. But you want to be honest, like when you went there, you don't want to say my new colleagues were stupid, but you want to describe like it was even more challenging than I thought it was. And this is everything they said was right. Everything they said was right. But I just knew that's what I wanted to do, or I had to see, even if you didn't know, I had to see if working in the nonprofit sector was for me. The only way would be to go. I was working on those projects at Bain or BCG in India, but holy moly, like I felt a little disconnected. I had to go and see how to kick the tires. That's how I learn. That's my style, right? And I went there. Dude, let me tell you something. It was a month full of Sundays worth of problems there, chock full of whatever, chock full of nuts. And but I worked it out. I had to build credibility, and they'll start asking you questions about how you build credibility, yada yada, right? So that's how you want to, that's where these types of conversations tend to go. When you start listing biggest challenges, yada yada yada. But getting back to my whole resume example, start going through it and looking at the things that are less conventional, right? Start looking at the leadership activities. So if you are an engineer, a scientist, whatever, and all of a sudden on your resume it says president of the art club, right? Or president of the paint drying watching club, that they'll ask you, what's up with that? Um, why'd you do it? What'd you get out of it? Is it what you thought it would be? How did you build the organization? Why did you pick that club over the other club? um, what's its status now? They'll tend to do that with projects. If you've left a company, what was if you left and gone to the United Way, or let's say Gates Foundation, you were working at McKinsey, India, so you talked about that super duper project. I thought you were doing well. Why'd you leave? But more than that, what's up? All those things you said you instituted, all those internal trainings, where are they now? Yada yada. All right. What else? Let's see here. All right. So goals. Now, as you get towards the end of the interview and the end of this presentation, they will start asking about your goals, right? And if you get here, it's not a bad thing at all. So don't think that. But usually they'll ask you this with like 2 or 3 minutes left. It's almost like they have to ask you. But if they don't ask you this, it's good. The only time where the interview is not the interview, probably isn't going well, is if they ask you questions like, "Who would you if you could mentor anybody, who would you mentor?" Right? Not somebody, pick somebody that's not in your industry. That was a question that was asked. And that was a question that's never been asked, but it was asked to one guy who really wasn't doing a good job, right? Um, but here, keep in mind, stick to what you wrote in your application, never deviate. I feel dumb assuming anybody would be that dumb out there, like to change their goals. But just remember, that horse got you the interview. Keep riding the horse. What are you doing? You know, put that skateboard away. So, and also keep in mind, and listen, if you got the interview, you probably already know this because you executed this on your app somewhere. They're more interested in your long-term goals, how you're going to make an impact on the industry, a country, a sector through something, right? But here's some questions. You wrote about starting your own company in the long term. Tell me about your vision. Talk to me about the company. And here's where it starts to get a little scary, right? What will your company do? Okay, you can answer that. What problem will it address? Okay, not a problem. You can answer that, right? Where did you get this idea from? Okay, it should be probably related to something personal, professional, or both, right? Now, here's where things start to get interesting. And this does not mean it's not going well. It just means you're not getting away with anything. Aren't there companies already like this, right? And if there are, okay, there are. They're not stupid, but what's so different about yours? So automatically, you should assume the second part of the question. They shouldn't have to ask you the second part of this question. What is so different about yours, right? Why are you just a copycat? What is so different about yours? Okay, you should have an idea. And then, and this is was asked of the military candidate that actually got into both Harvard and Stanford, right? And HKS. But he was asked, why will your company be the best, right? He was talking about some risk management firm that he wanted to start. Why will they be the best, right? In other words, what's so different about yours? Now, this is perhaps another presentation about techniques on how to answer these individual questions more. I mean, I have a whole other document presentation about that. But you know, there are certain frameworks so you don't get caught with your pants down. Like, why will it be the best? Okay, I guess you can kind of compete on technology, delivery, execution. But what it comes down to fundamentally at a higher level is the types of people you have access to and hire, right? So what he said was, he has access to all these ex-military people or people from NGOs that understand operations on the ground, yada, yada, yada. He can leverage those people. It's a very pragmatic point of view. So most companies, he said, that do these types of things that I want to F it up because they're at an arm's length sitting in a nice air conditioned office in New York City and they don't know the realities of West Central Africa, for example. Anyway, um, all right, moving on. Why HBS? Well, I'm sure that, listen, do not launch into a freaking discussion of Michael Porter's five forces or Professor Gerder. No, first and foremost, my friends, and if you don't know this already, so help you God, but I mean, I suspect you, the case method. Okay, remember, they're looking for butts in seats in the Harvard classroom, in the HBS classroom. They exclusively teach was the case method, right? They need to know you will survive. Oh, no, sorry, thrive in that environment. How do they know that? You've never, you can be like, oh, well, when I was an undergraduate, I had a case method class, or I took Harvard Extension, so I know all about Harvard. Bullshit. Don't give them that answer. I swear to you. Do not give them that answer. Do not list that on the education section of your resume. Too late, probably. But here, what you're going to say is you're going to say, well, I mean, at this point, you would have already proved it. So there really not a lot of discussion that needs to go on here. You either proved it during the interview, during your essays, or not. But really, if they push you on this, you'd be like, the number one reason why, straight up, case method, right? It to me, and everything I've learned about it, I haven't set foot on Harvard yet, is that it represents legitimately the most challenging, rigorous, intense learning environment. And when I thought about all the pretty schools out there I wanted to apply to, you know, even GSB, right? What I realized about myself and what I learned about myself, and I want to thank you folks. I mean, you don't have to be this gratuitous, but it's like what I learned about what I know about myself, because I am a self-aware human being, um, was that the challenges in my life have fundamentally transformed me, made me better, more capable, right? Even the mistakes and defeats along the way that I've had have all been incredibly valuable, and they all in their DNA are about challenges, right? And probably wrote about a great big challenge in your essay, hopefully. But you would say, so when I look at how I've learned always best in the past and transformed and really, really emerged as a leader and frankly almost a different person, it's all been because of these great challenges. And when I look at Harvard and the case method, I mean, it's oodles of noodles. Like it's oodles of challenges, right? It is a cauldron, right? It is a lava pit of challenges, of rigor, of intensity in the learning environment. In there, it's like think of it like this: it's a gladiator arena. There's 90 students in there with their swords swinging, um, it's one where I know I'm going to be pushed beyond any comfort zone. I know I'm going to be pushed more than any other business school or learning methodology, and I know it's the one, therefore, I that will transform me the most, right? Into the leader that I must be with the skills and more importantly, the judgment that I must have, leadership judgment I must have, because you can't give a spreadsheet for every problem that's going to occur in the future. The leadership judgment I'm going to need to solve these great big scary problems in the developing world or down the street, right? The end. And that's it. You're probably not going to get there, but the first thing out of your mouth when they say why HBS, you're like case method. Paul told me so. Anyway, of course, you know, pretty it up a little bit. All right. Oh, here we go. Post-interview assignment, slightly different shade of orange. All right. So the one thing I want to tell you without going through every single one of these bullet points here is it's due within 24 hours. Don't try to make it it's supposed to be as if you were summarizing a meeting you had with a customer or a client or your boss, right? Doesn't mean grammar mistakes. It doesn't mean writing style is completely different from the Shakespearean English you wrote in your essay, right? It still has to be intelligible. But here, what I would say is, how you just had your interview. How well did we get to know you? My God, the answer is you got to know me extremely well, very well. You got to know everything you need to know about me. Not everything about me, everything you need to know about me from the entire process and the interview. And I'd like to thank Sarah Lucas for that, or Chad Losey, or whoever, Eileen Chang for that, right? I'd like to thank every single one of them. And now you don't go on and on. Oh, you guys are so awesome, and I can't believe you, or I can't believe I got to meet you. You know, had a poster of you on my wall for years. Following you on LinkedIn. No, you just say thank you for the amount of time and the diligence that you put into it, right? Thank you for the conversation, then move on, right? And because of the insightful and thorough questioning, really interrogation, that Chad put me through, and that's what it's going to be, right? It's good. It is by design. He spent time studying you, and it was thorough, and that gave you plenty of opportunities. And this is not it wasn't a beating or a drubbing. It's those were the opportunities I needed to tell my story, to explain some of the questions that he had, right? And really, really get it all out there. So at the end of this process that you got, and then I would go through almost question by question, almost summarizing everything that you talked about, right? Quickly. And if there's anything you missed, you would frame it as, hey, listen, had we had more time on this one part where we were talking about my favorite color, I would have added that not only do I like navy blue, but I like kind of that purplish royal blue, right? Um, had we had time, right? Anyway, but you never, like, if you flubbed an answer, if you effed an answer up, you should acknowledge it here. Now, listen, that could be up for debate. Depends how you frame it. Again, everything is about its execution. But if there's something that you needed to clarify, because Chad winced or whatever, leaned over side of his seat and just made a scowly face. Explain that, please, right? Just so there's no misinterpretation. But in general, that should not happen. And if it does not happen in that interview, right? Don't start making up stories in your head that, oh my God, I screwed that up or whatever. If he doesn't have a weird reaction, if he doesn't like keep asking you all these questions about all this stuff, like get a grip. If you didn't screw it up, don't say you screwed up. Don't say you'd add in all this stuff, because the fundamental question at the end of this post-interview assignment is, if they're saying, if you keep saying I should have added this, I should, well, then why the hell didn't you add it? Because at the end of the interview, they're going to ask you, time permitting, is there anything else you would like to tell me? And if you didn't tell them that, why not? Don't start that don't start that lawnmower, in the don't start that whole train in the post interview assignment. Leave it be, let it rest, right? Only add additional stuff if you feel like maybe you flubbed an answer, right? So because remember, if you start looking like an apologist for something, that's not confidence, right? That's not that nobody sells a car at a dealership by apologizing for how shitty its paint job is, right? Or how bad its gas mileage is, or any of that stuff, right? No, they sell the other aspects. So do that. We all know this, but the reason I'm telling you this is because the psychology and how it f's with your head, it ends up having a lot of somewhat bizarre outcomes. And that's when I come along with my clients and I just start smacking them across the. Just kidding. But that's when I have to correct, modify the behavior. All right. So, quick and dirty note: I wouldn't really make it over a page. Keep it on a page if you can. For some people, that means 800 words. For some people, that means 500. Whatever. Just you don't need to go over everything. You are helping them summarize. I believe you're helping them pragmatically summarize what went on in the interview, even though they're probably taking notes or even recording it if it's on Skype. But help them out here and emphasize certain points that maybe you brought up, but maybe you didn't emphasize as much. You can emphasize them here a little bit more, right? So massage it a little bit without making stuff up that didn't happen. All right. Now, and then here's a tactic, let's get into the pragmatics right at the end here. Okay. As soon as you're done with the interview, and again, this used to be more relevant when you had opportunities to take class tours and stuff like that. So instead of going back to lunch, instead of going back to sleep, instead of doing whatever, take an hour. And it should only take an hour. If it takes more than that, you have an incredible memory, or you're putting way too much detail. Take an hour, write down question, answer, question, answer, question. So it's like, here's the question I was asked. Here's the order I was asked in. Here's 3, 4 lines, what we talked about, and here's maybe one line about what maybe more I could have added or what I felt I wasn't sure about. And I would send normally with my clients, send it to me. Like, okay, if you want to sign up, and here's the sales pitch. If you want to sign up, email me, contact information, a few slides, maybe the next slide, whatever. We can deal with that. But here, um, yeah, just for yourself, because you think you're going to remember that. No, 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 my friends. Life has a weird way of making you forget stuff, at least when you get to my age. All right. Next slide here. I know some of you probably have to use the restroom. Oh, we're done. Look at that. Sudden death, just like the interview. I did that on purpose. Um, if you need help with your HBS interview, you know what to do, right? Clicky click, or hit me up on LinkedIn, whatever. Uh, and that's all. So let's go to the comments here. Oh my God. Okay, so let's see here. Are there any? Oh, nobody has any questions. Wow, this is amazing. If I just gave this whole presentation to myself, um, post your questions, EP, get notifications. Looks like no. Looks like I'm off the hook here. Anyway, you folks know what to do. Um, hit me up. I'm gonna hang out here for a few seconds on the presentation. Other than that, hit rewind, watch again. All right, a few comments here. This was a great sharing session. Thank you. You're welcome. I mean, anytime you want to log on to YouTube, you can watch it. Let's see here. All right, Sanchit, can you please tell me what we need to build our profile on HBS? So I'm assuming, so Sanchit, okay. This is a huge question, right? And it's one that it's going to almost be impossible to answer because I don't know your background. If I don't know your individual background, I can't tell you specifically, right? But there's so many different things, and it all starts really from undergrad. Uh, um, yeah, I mean that's a separate. I think I do have a presentation about how to get into Harvard here on GMAT Club's YouTube channel. So if you start with that, I don't know how long it is, maybe a couple of hours. Then turn around and email me with your questions. Do you have any? Here we go, Lawrence, Mr. Tran. Good question here. So Mr. Tran, for those who cannot see his question, he asks, um, do you have any tips for the HBS round one further consideration deferred to round two? Okay, so I don't know if they changed the rules this year. I had 6 clients from round 1 get interview invites. None got further consideration, right? Now, okay, first off, so Mr. Tran, the first thing you need to know, it's not the kiss of death, right? It's not listen, Harvard doesn't have a lot does if you ever get waitlisted, which is different than what happened to you. But if you ever get waitlisted, Harvard does not have a lot of people on that wait list. So you are lucky. Now, will they go to that wait list? Depends. But here, um, Mr. Chan asks, further tips for H1 round. So there's a status that you can get where they say, hey, you don't have an interview to invite in round one. We like you. We're putting you in a holding pattern, more or less, and we're going to reevaluate you with the people that come in round two, right? And there may be several reasons for that, right? They they like you. um, you are somebody who they are definitely considering. And people always think like, oh, I'm pretty, I'm just not pretty enough, right? Okay, maybe you can look at it that way, but they're looking. I had this happen last year, by the way. They're looking to see who comes in round two. Maybe they've already sent out enough invites for people with a last name Tran who work in consulting, as an example, in round one, right? Maybe oversubscribed, right? Or maybe there's something on your profile. I hate to say low GMAT score because honestly, I feel like Harvard, in my experience, does not care about what your GMAT score is. I mean, as long as it's presentable, um, they may be looking for something else. So it's not. So it's a legitimate. Like, just hang tight. We're gonna get to you, right? So what they I believe, because I get this twisted in my head with waitlisted candidates, but I believe sometime in the next few months, um, uh, Lawrence, they're gonna allow you to send an update. By the way, Harvard used to never allow any additional information back in the day, right? Changed a few years back, but I think there will be an opportunity, if I remember correctly, and I'm not getting confused with the waitlisted applicants, where you can update them in a few months on what you've been up to. And trust me, my friend, you want to do that. But beyond that, I mean, you could. And here's the thing: you could get, if you know an alumni that knows you very well, you work with that person for some reason. and they didn't recommend you, you could get that person to vouch for you, an alumni, even a current student, and it would be a very quick email to chat. Now, remember, listen, you can ask your friend to do that, right? But it shouldn't come across to Chad or anybody else that you made your friend do that. It should come across unsolicited, right? But if you ask them, maybe that's solicited. But so there are things that you can do, but obviously your friends or some guy at work that's a boss or gal would know that you're applying. And so if they ask you about the status, you can say this, and hopefully they know enough to send it. But you don't want to put anybody up to it. Yeah. So there's something, they can do that. Lawrence, honestly, if you email me, I have I have more tips, right? I just some of them are escaping me. Some of them I don't want to say over the something that's being recorded, if that makes sense. You know, not because there's anything nefarious, but because can't give away all the gold. Anyway, uh, but you're not. So let me give you an example, Lawrence. Uh, so I had two clients that applied, and well, one applied. Listen, it's very similar backgrounds to clients this past year. They applied. Both were working within education, um, and one she was, basically got this notice, right? And eventually she did get an opportunity to interview in round two, along with somebody else who had applied round two, not round one, with a similar background. And guess what happened? They both got in, right? So just know that there is a good probability you will get the interview. Just email me and I'll give you some more pointed advice. And just know that anything they ask you to do, of course, do. But what I'd be looking for, like what you can specifically do, Lawrence, is at work. Like when you send an update to the admissions committee, whether you're waitlisted or on this further consideration list, you want to make sure you have something fairly substantial. Now, I know it's only been a few months, right? But just think about the day you pressed click to apply to the day you submit that wait list or that further consideration update, something like that. You want to be able to have a couple things, right? So if you've gotten promoted, certainly. But if you've asked for and received more responsibility, or if you have an upcoming promotion, or if you have an upcoming project that you're going to take on, whatever, it's better if you're already doing it and you've made progress, to put that in the letter. But that's what I'd say. And even outside of the office, if there are leadership initiatives that you have been involved in and you can maybe ask for or assume greater leadership for it, then do it. Just make sure you have something substantial. Like if you email me, maybe I can provide you some examples, right? Um, but but yeah, that's what it is. I mean, and honestly, Lawrence, I'd have to know a little bit more about your background before I could tell you, kind of like my other answer to the other gentleman who asked another question earlier. Then I can formulate a little bit of a plan of attack, right? Anyway, did I did I tell you a lot of did I tell you a whole bunch of nothing there? Anyway, but just email me.
Hey,
Okay,
Paul.
so yeah,
Paul, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, it looks like you forgot, you missed a question that was posted by us. Uh, if you just scroll over,
at
you
10:36.
1106.
Okay, so my wife got an interview invite.
That one, yes.
Okay, so here we go. My wife got an interview invite, but I didn't. Eesh. Does anyone know whether HBS considers at all the couple's application? Because it seems like it didn't weigh in the decision. This is a post mortem, of course. Nothing to do now. Okay, so a few things. I believe Harvard does ask if you're applying with anybody else. Hopefully, somebody can post that. I don't remember exactly, but on the application, I think they do ask if you're applying with anyone else. Okay, I'm pretty sure that they do. But anyway, so if they ask a question like that, um, are you applying in conjunction with anybody else? They do consider it, right? And why? They consider it because of situations like this where, let's say you got into Stanford and your wife didn't, or she gets into Harvard and you get into, let's say, Wharton, and she gets into Wharton, but you didn't get into Harvard. You know what I mean, right? So she got into Harvard and Wharton, and you only got into Wharton. Well, what's going to happen, Harvard, right? Um, most of the time, y- you and your wife are going to go to Wharton together. They're going to lose you. So it's almost pointless to extend her an invite and not you. So that being said, why did they do that? Why would they do that? So I think while they do consider it, if there is just something, if there's that much, if she is that much of a standout, let's say, and again, so it's a little bit of, I don't know your individual background, so maybe there was something wrong with your profile, and I hate to say that, or maybe it was because her profile is pretty outstanding, right? Um, so it's no guarantee even if they ask that question. They just want to know what's going on in the background. But it's like it could be, maybe you work in consulting or like for example, if you work in consulting right now or iBanking, it's pretty tough to get an interview, right? And maybe she's one of the few women to ever do something at her work, even if it is in banking or consulting or something like that. Um, then, they like, if they see a lot of overcoming obstacles with her profile, but maybe not a lot with yours, or maybe the obstacles you have overcome are what they see in line with a lot of guys that may be applying, then that could make the difference, right? And it really depends, of course, on what was written in the essay. That's why they give you kind of a really blank page to write on and make the question prompts so open. So if she talked about a lot of very personal things, and how she has become the young leader that she is, and she's overcome significant obstacles to get there, and that's her story, versus, and again, I'm guessing here, I don't want to make any assumptions, but if your story was more vanilla or talked more about your accomplishments and not a lot about the internal mechanisms of why you value that, or really what obstacles you've overcome to get beyond, any struggles that you've had, then that would make the difference. To be quite honest with you, even if you have a very strong profile, if she just has an exceptional profile, I mean, she's maybe that good, right? I mean, after all, you married her, right? I mean, no joke. So if she's that good, um, and she can articulate the underlying the thoughts and actions and decisions and rationale behind it that she's made, you know, that's why, that's who they're looking for. To be honest with you, right? And I'm not making any assumptions about you, but this is sometimes a struggle that I see with guys applying, but also, sometimes people who have never had to face significant challenges, when they go to write, it's very hard to come up with something. And again, I'm not talking about you necessarily, but what I've noticed, and again, this is just from my experience. I'm not saying this about everybody, but I will have a lot of clients, female from developing countries, right? And they will have stories of where they've had to overcome things that would make your jaw drop, right? And at the same time, a lot of my guy clients from the very same countries won't have as much. And because of the challenges and obstacles that people have had to overcome, let's say a woman in some developing country, for example, they will have a lot more like intuition and introspection, and they will have a lot of empathy. And you'll see that, manifest in the decisions that they've made. I mean, imagine being the first woman in a family or in a village or at a school to crack something, to do something. So if that's what she told stories like that, then and they love that stuff. But who wouldn't, right? So it's not because she's a woman that she got it, but it's because um, she has that Harvard thing, right? That ability to overcome obstacles, which is I've seen sometimes harder for guys to talk about. You know, in writing, by the way, without going too far off point, there is a male and a female perspective. The female perspective, often when you write a good story, is like, this is how I felt, this is what I was thinking. My actions are a lot more collaborative and communal. And the guy part, and you'll see this in movies too, right? Is I saved the princess, I won $1 million, I drove a Ferrari. So guys often define themselves by their accomplishments, right? So if it was a little bit of that in the writing, yeah, Harvard needs both. You can't just be a very empathetic person who's never achieved anything, but sometimes you definitely need both. But that could have made the difference, right? Now, again, I know nothing about your background. I do think that Harvard. I do think your wife. I mean, listen, again, not to provide personal advice because what do I know about that kind of stuff? But it's Harvard's, you and your wife and Harvard, you face a difficult decision here when she probably gets accepted, right? And have to do long distance thing because it's like, What are you gonna do? Force that? They're forcing you into a difficult position. Now, is that enough to extend you the interview? No, but at the same time, they're not. They're probably not going to land her, right? To be honest with you, unless you go to MIT. So start prepping that app for Sloan. Anyway, okay. So let's see. Okay. So there's a GMAT club. Okay, I'm just scrolling up really quick. All right. So I got it now. So Shrishti asks, how much weightage is given to work experience during the application review? Okay, so a lot, right? So I mean, if you don't have any, this is a very broad question. I would have to know exactly why you're asking this question and what your work experiences is, because I'm assuming you're asking for you and not a friend. But here, what I would say is that you a lot. I mean, it's almost everything because it is. Listen, the way these schools look at it is if you want to go do something in the future, if you believe in something in the future, um, like I want to go save every fuzzy pet, in Canada, then why aren't you doing something like that now? Why aren't you stepping up into positions and challenging yourself with these greater positions of leadership and responsibility and doing well now? Right. And how are you going to demonstrate that? Probably not by volunteering at the Fuzzy Dog Pet Rescue on weekends, but rather by going to work for some pet tech, I'll call it pet tech company, right? Um, or starting your own, whatever cloning, cloning company. But it is that type of thing where you spend your 9 in the morning to 5 in the afternoon, your best efforts moving towards a certain goal or passion that you have, acting upon it and building up leadership experience and doing well in the process. So, at a high level, given your broad question, work experience is everything. I mean, where else are you going to demonstrate that you are the type of leader, you are the type of person who makes these types of decisions the right way? You go after challenges other than work experience, right? So if you don't have enough of it, keep working, right? Keep looking for those opportunities. And again, Harvard doesn't necessarily care, as most business schools, if you're kind of shifting jobs every year, every 2 years. What they're looking to see is that leadership progression. Of course, you don't want to be going from banking to being working for the circus as a clown, right? Even if you're head clown, or clown director, has to be consistent, has to, but it has to definitely show leadership progression. So go back. So if you're still in school, here's the other thing I've noticed about Harvard and Stanford, especially, but Harvard over the last few years, and again this year, if you're working for a great company, whether it's a great bank, Deutsche Bank, let's say, or you're working for Bain, BCG, McKinsey, really, um, you have to, if you say ultimately I want to achieve this through my goals, and maybe you've only had some exposure through it at Deloitte or Bain or BCG or wherever, you have to like get out of that safe environment and go work on site in operations for the types of industry companies, entrepreneurial companies, whatever it may be that you say you want to start in the future. So if you're playing it safe, you're hiding behind the spreadsheet a little bit. I mean, I don't mean that in a malicious way, but if you're at an arm's length, um, what I've seen here, especially in the last few years, is that Harvard and especially not never Stanford, they're just not going to take you because you're not putting your money where your mouth is. You're not taking those risks. You're not leaving behind a damn good job, the safety of that BCG and all its resources or Bain or whatever, and going and working for um, even a nonprofit, working for some startup, right? Getting out there, stretching your legs and executing and figuring it out for yourself if this is something you really want to do in the future. And at the same time, having leadership impact, right? So there you go with work experience. I think maybe we're getting a little bit off of interview stuff, but whatevs, because I don't see a lot of questions here. Um, Anybody else? Anybody else? Going once. So, Shruti, Lawrence, Sanchit, email me and I'll see what I can do. And if anybody's on this presentation, that's now close to 2 hours, that needs a little more insight, email me. I'll see what I can scrounge up. Of course, we can do interview prep, whatever. Somebody on my team can help out. All right. That being said, at going once, going twice at the 1 hour and 54-minute mark, sold. That's all I have. I will see all you folks later on the next presentation. Check out my other ones that are on GMAT Club. Honestly, they're awesome. All right, later.